Imagine being named Model of the Year, your face on Calvin Klein billboards and crowned the new face of fashion, while off the runway, fighting battles no one could see. She didn't look like anyone else on the runway. She arrived late by modeling standards, found at the edge of adolescence, but only breaking through in her 20s. With a gap between her teeth, a fuller figure, and a look that refused to be prettified, she became fashion's anti-model, raw, unexpected, instantly iconic. But success came with a price. The schedule, the scrutiny, the pressure to hold a single image night after night pushed her toward coping strategies she kept out of the headlines. At the height of her fame, Lara reached a point where something had to change. So how do you hold a career that demands perfection when the cost is your own sense of self? Lara Stone wasn't the kind of girl fashion usually bets on. She grew up in Mierlo, a small Dutch town where nothing hinted at supermodel glamour. The first time the industry noticed her was pure accident: a family trip to Paris, a ride on the metro, and a scout who saw something different in the 12-year-old with long limbs and a gap in her smile. By 15, she was standing on stage at the Elite Model Look competition, but the crown went to someone else. For the next few years, she floated on the edges of modeling, doing catalog work, sharing cramped apartments with 10 other girls, waiting for a call that never seemed to come. By the time she hit her 20s, most insiders would have written her off. Too old, too late, too unconventional. But fashion is nothing if not fickle. In 2006, she signed with IMG and walked into Riccardo Tisci's Givenchy couture show. It wasn't just another casting. Tisci was building his dark, gothic vision for Givenchy, and Lara fit it perfectly. Her deliberate, grounded walk cut against the polished strut of other models. She didn't vanish into the sample sizes or the expected pretty mold. She gave clothes a weight and presence that felt new. Suddenly, what had once held her back became her power. Karine Roitfeld declared her a star. Photographers compared her to a gothic Brigitte Bardot. By 2008, Lara was no longer a forgotten hopeful. She was everywhere. On Vogue covers, in Prada campaigns, walking Chanel and Louis Vuitton. Then came 2010, the year everything crystallized. She was named Model of the Year at the British Fashion Awards and signed an exclusive with Calvin Klein, a deal that made her the face of everything from jeans to fragrance. Her black and white image towered over city streets, staring down from giant billboards. Lara Stone had arrived. But in fashion, every image hides another story. For Lara, the world was finally celebrating her, yet behind that celebration, the pressure was already tightening. For the outside world, Lara Stone's Calvin Klein deal was a career peak. It was the kind of contract that most models never even come close to. And in 2010, it confirmed her status as the face of a new era in fashion. But Lara herself never hid the fact that the reality felt different. In interviews, she admitted she didn't enjoy the runway at all, that her inner voice during shows was simply, "Don't fall, don't fall." The industry praised her as the anti-model, the one who broke through despite not fitting the mold. But those compliments were always double-edged. She was celebrated for looking different, yet constantly reminded that her body was out of step with the sample sizes hanging backstage. She tried to meet the demands, diets, quick fixes, the pressure to be smaller. And the strain only added to the exhaustion of long days and relentless travel. Like many models, she turned to coping mechanisms. For Lara, it was alcohol. She later admitted she had started carrying vodka in her handbag during Fashion Week, drinking to steady herself between shows. At the very moment her career was at its most visible, she was relying on a habit that was pulling her apart in private. By 2009, she called herself a complete alcoholic, describing the fights she picked and the way the lifestyle had taken control. "One day I woke up and thought, I can't live like this anymore," she later recalled, explaining she could become aggressive when drunk. "I've picked a lot of fights in my day, but no one ever wanted to hit me back." It was then that she checked into rehab, flying to South Africa with the idea that it might just be a holiday from the industry. Instead, she found herself in group therapy sessions, learning how to talk about the pressure she had been burying. She joked later about spending afternoons playing the bongos, but the experience was serious enough to mark a turning point. She came back sober, determined not to return to the same destructive cycle. The public never really saw this side of her. On the surface, she was still the Calvin Klein star. But privately, she had already confronted the cost of keeping up the image that made her famous. The drinking was getting way out of control. "I just didn't recognize myself anymore," she later admitted. It was just this really awful feeling of becoming a totally different person and not being able to control it at all. But the truth is, Lara's story isn't unusual. Fashion has always built women up for being different, then quietly pushed them to conform anyway. The body pressures she faced in 2009 are not relics of the past. They're still present today, even if the language has shifted. Agencies may talk about diversity and inclusivity, but the sample sizes backstage haven't changed, and the message to models often hasn't either. For Lara, it became alcohol. For others, it has been crash diets, pills, or worse. That contradiction, celebrating individuality while enforcing impossible standards, is one of fashion's most enduring patterns. Lara's struggle just happened to make it visible because she was brave enough to speak about it later. When Lara Stone left rehab, her career could easily have stalled. In fashion, time away is rarely forgiven. But instead of fading, she returned to work with a new clarity, and the industry still wanted her. Within months, she was back on major covers, continuing her Calvin Klein campaigns, and adding a new role as the face of L'Oréal Paris. Standing in front of cameras declaring, "Because you're worth it," carried extra weight when you knew what she had just been through. She also began making different choices in her personal life. In 2010, Lara married British comedian David Walliams in a high-profile ceremony at Claridge's. The marriage didn't last, but during those years she gave birth to her first child, Alfred, in 2013. Motherhood shifted her focus in a way the industry rarely allows models to admit. She spoke openly about the difficulty of balancing work with parenting, and for the first time in years, her career wasn't the only priority. But stepping back came with its own price. After her pregnancy, tabloids and even industry insiders were quick to call her too fat and speculate whether she had lost her place in fashion. It was a cruel reminder that for models, the applause never lasts long, and the pressure to conform is waiting the moment you slip. For Lara, the criticism wasn't career-ending, but it showed just how unforgiving the system remains, even for someone who had already reached the very top. By the mid-2000s, she was no longer the omnipresent face on every billboard. But that was by design. Lara scaled back her work, choosing projects more carefully, and keeping space for herself outside of fashion. She continued to model, shooting campaigns, walking select shows, proof she could still set the conversation when she chose to. And yet, even in this quieter phase, she remained culturally relevant. In 2015, she appeared alongside Justin Bieber in Calvin Klein's controversial ad campaign, proving she still had the power to spark headlines. Later collaborations, like her 2016 denim collection with Frame, showed she wasn't just a face for hire. She could shape projects in her own image. For Lara, survival became the real success. She had lived through the pressure cooker of mid-2000s fashion, confronted her addiction, and found a way to keep working without losing herself. Unlike many models whose careers collapsed under the same weight, she managed to rewrite the ending on her own terms. And maybe that's the lesson often missing in fashion's obsession with comebacks and falls. Survival itself is an achievement. For Lara, it meant carving out space where both the work and her own life could exist side by side. A balance that so many models are still denied. Even as Lara scaled back in the mid-2000s, her presence still carried weight. In 2016, she was chosen for the Pirelli calendar, not just another job, but a cultural milestone that confirmed her place among fashion's icons. She also fronted campaigns for brands like Balmain and continued to appear in Vogue editorials, proof that even without a non-stop schedule, her name still had power. But while her career moved at a slower pace, her personal life shifted more dramatically. Her marriage to David Walliams ended in 2015, a period when her private life was as much tabloid fodder as her work. A few years later, in 2018, she met property developer David Griefson. The relationship offered stability, and in 2021 the two married in an intimate ceremony. By 2023 they welcomed a child together, Lara's second. For someone once splashed across billboards, these milestones unfolded largely off-camera, a sign of how much she valued privacy over spectacle. That perspective has shaped how she relates to fashion today. Lara remains signed with IMG, but chooses her projects carefully, no longer chasing every campaign or runway. In interviews, she's been candid about the realities of the industry, the way models are celebrated for their individuality, yet pressured to shrink into the same narrow standard. During the #MeToo reckoning, she admitted she was shocked by many of the stories. And though she hadn't experienced the worst of it herself, her comments revealed how aware she was of the dangers others faced. She never positioned herself as an activist, but her honesty about body image, alcohol, and the contradictions of modeling has been its own form of quiet advocacy. Her legacy isn't built on scandal or collapse. Lara redefined what beauty could look like in the late 2000s, proving that imperfection, a gap-toothed smile, a fuller figure, could be just as iconic as the traditional mold. And when the pressure nearly broke her, she didn't vanish. She found balance, rebuilt her life, and proved that endurance can be as radical as reinvention. 2 decades after being discovered on the Paris metro, Lara Stone remains a symbol of both the cost and resilience of modeling. She embodies fashion's contradictions, celebrated for standing out, punished when she did, yet still managed to carve out a career on her own terms. She was once crowned the new face of fashion. Off the runway, her real story was about survival. So has fashion really changed since Lara's rise? Or are models today still paying the same price? Let me know what you think of this in the comments below. I am very curious to hear your opinions. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next one.